The motion before the House is this House would outlaw homeschooling. Right, so proposition. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, what is homeschooling? And that is when parents decide to educate their children at home. They do not send them to school. The parents act as teachers. They may occasionally hire in a tutor to do lessons now and again, but for the most part, it's the parents delivering the education. So it's nothing new. It's gone on for centuries, but it's become less common. In recent centuries, there's been a bit of an upturn in it, spike in it, perhaps I could say, in the last decade or two. So why should we outlaw homeschooling? Well, it's very difficult for a teacher to teach a whole class of 20 or 30 pupils. Even this teacher is a specialist in that subject. How on earth can a parent teach all the subjects to a high standard? Now, teaching a 5-year-old, not too difficult to be able to teach them literacy and mathematics to the requisite standard. But when pupils are 18, virtually nobody can teach the whole gamut of subjects to a proper level for that age. So the parents have to be real polymaths to do so. The children, unless they're fantastic at autodidaction, they're not going to have a decent education. Now, it depends which country you're in. For example, the United Kingdom, people only do 3 or 4 subjects in their last couple of years of school. So that might not be that difficult if the parents happen to be fantastic at those few subjects. But in many countries, people are doing up to a dozen subjects in their last year of school, and therefore it's all but impossible for a parent to be able to teach them adequately. And these homeschools, they usually have no inspections. We don't know the children are safe. The vast majority of parents are responsible and benevolent, but just occasionally parents are abusive and nobody is there to inspect. You can't have the facilities you need, like a science laboratory or gymnasium or anything else in a house, unless you're a multi-millionaire. They're not going to be playing sports, and really only nutters would want this kind of thing. People with really moronic ideas, people are absolute cranks, religious nuts, maniacs, and so on. So the children would lose out for all sorts of reasons. They wouldn't be socialising with others. School is an experience that's shared by virtually everyone. It's very difficult to make friends. We don't know what sort of timetable these people are working. These children may be forced to work at home. Maybe that's why the parents really keep them at home to work on their farm or whatever it is. Now, the state has the prerogative to ensure that children have a decent education, and we have to consider the children's rights, that the parents' rights are trumped by those of the child. Not all parents are wise or responsible. We have to frame laws on that basis. That's what Burke would have said. We can't make laws based on the fallacious assumption that everybody is intelligent, everybody has the best of intentions. No, that's not the case. We have to remember that some people are unwise, some people are malevolent, just a few. And that's what school is there for. No school is not perfect, but it would be an awful lot better than being trapped at home. So that's why we need to ensure that children are properly taught. You could look at so many human rights instruments saying that children have the right to an education. And so since the 19th century, most countries have gradually introduced state education. Obviously, there could be an independent school so long as it conforms to certain regulations. That we know that the children are being taught properly and that they are achieving a reasonably high standard in relation to their natural capability. So let me go over again why homeschooling ought to be outlawed. Because parents can almost never provide a proper education for their children at home. Because the children will be unable to make friends in most cases, because they don't mix with people from their age cohort, and because it is the government's duty to ensure that children are properly educated, and because it is the child's right to go to school, whatever the parents think. And that is why I urge you to vote for the motion. Right, I am the opposition speaker now. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, I oppose this dreadful motion for a number of reasons. Because homeschooling is better schooling, because homeschooling is suitable to particular people, because schools have their manifold failings, and because we have to think of the right to family life. So I shall go over those one by one. So there's plenty of studies. There are plenty of studies to show that children perform better under homeschooling. You could look at the data by almost every single metric. Pupils who are homeschooled outperform their peers who go to schools. Some houses have extensive libraries. Now we have the internet. We don't need real libraries in many cases. We would agree to inspections of homeschooling, and it's true that there's some parents who are not up to scratch, but there's no reason to penalise those parents who do provide a superb education. Parents might be teachers themselves. They might be scholars themselves, so completely capable of teaching their child to a very high standard. Homeschooling is better for pupils. We know one-on-one is the most efficacious way of teaching people. The speaker on the opposite side talked about classes of up to 30. Wherein lies the problem? The children get almost no individual attention in school. There's so much distraction. But I digress. So I'll come on to that later. So anyway, the other speaker, he was insulting of people who have religious faith, and it's preposterous to suggest that they're bad parents. They could be outstanding. A parent of no faith could also be dreadful. There's no rhyme or reason to thinking religious people are bad or irreligious people are good. There's no connection, even an inverse one, between faith and being a monstrous parent. All right, look at children with various difficulties, psychological problems or personality disorders or Asperger's syndrome or OCDC, obsessive compulsive disorder, hyperactivity, attention deficit disorder, things of that nature. They find a classroom situation all but intolerable, and they cause a great disruption to the class. They wreck the education of other pupils. So it's far better they're taught at home by their parents who love them, who know how to handle them, and can waltz around their psychological peculiarities. So that's why it's better for them to be taught at home, and moreover, better for the mainstream pupils not to be disrupted by pupils who've got various issues they need to contend with. So parents are entitled to pass on their beliefs to their children, and we could have an inspection regime to ensure that the children are exposed to countervailing philosophies. We know that homeschooling is highly successful in the United States, and it's often the most educated and affluent parents who go in for this form of education. And as the other speaker said, it's nothing new, and in fact it was the norm centuries ago when educational attainment was much greater. As the saying goes, let's say in America, a century ago people were learning ancient Greek at university, now they're learning remedial English. And what's the difference? What's happened in between there? It's obviously publicly funded schooling. Now let's go on to all the difficulties of school. Obviously there's severe bullying at school sometimes. Occasionally there are abusive teachers, there are mass shootings. Some teachers are really below par. And sometimes they're dreadful results. The teachers are spending most of their time acting more or less as police in the school. Or form filling, producing these stacks of paperwork which are no good to anyone. And because of this bureaucracy and this mania for box ticking, not much teaching actually goes on. And so the worst pupils, the most malevolent ones, they can ruin the education of the others. So that's why pupils are much better off staying with their parents at home and being taught there, when the parents can do so adequately. Most parents are not capable of doing it. So we're saying there shouldn't be much homeschooling, but to say there should be absolutely none is a gross intrusion on personal rights, which should infringe on family life. So it's a family's right to do this if they can provide a good education for their children at home. Think of family rights, think of human rights instruments, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights or the European Convention on Human Rights, which enshrines the right to family life. And that's law in many countries around the world. UNICEF, that's the United Nations International Children's Educational Fund, also permits this. So for certain children who are eccentric, the homeschooling is definitely the right option. So let's get away from this nanny state, this bully state which wants to poke its nose into our affairs and intrude in family life and deprive us of the right to bring up our education, bring up our children, and the way we see fit, provide them with an education that we think is good, especially if inspectors agree. And for those reasons, I beg to oppose.